How's it going, everybody? My name is Will from Ghosthack, and today I'm going to show you how I go about filling my tracks and adding layers on top of my tracks in order to make my tracks sound very full, rich, and overall just thicker and more filled out. So for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to be doing this to a dubstep track. Now this is hardly even a track, it's barely an idea. What I have here is I have a drum loop, a little sidechain trigger that I'm going to use later when I'm adding these effects, and I also have just a bass loop that I chopped up and threw together in a really basic pattern, just really basic dubstep fashion. Sounds like this. Nothing too complicated there, nothing too special, but these are sounds from the Ghosthack Dubstep Sound Arsenal, which you can find on the Ghosthack website, but I'm going to use this as a template, and I'm going to layer things on top of this in order to make this drop sound much more filled out, heavy, and overall it's just going to sound a lot richer. So here we are in the DAW with this little dubstep drop, and the first thing I'm going to add to kind of fill out this track is hi-hats. Some of you probably saw that coming. So just for the purposes of this tutorial, I have a little hi-hat loop here. We have some close hi-hat action going on, and then we also have an open hi-hat hitting on the offbeat, and this is going to run through the sidechain. And already this is just going to add a little more rhythm to this loop. So that's step one, and probably the most important part of this hi-hat loop is going to be the offbeat hi-hat, and we're going to add other things on the offbeat as well. And for at least this particular style of dubstep, that's going to give it a little more bounce, a little more flow. It's not going to sound so stagnant. This does apply to other genres as well. This isn't just a dubstep tutorial. This is for a lot of other genres of music, and all of these kind of tips and tricks that I'm showing you that I'm using in this little dubstep drop can be carried over to other styles that you think they would match. Just kind of pick and choose between these, or just create a combination of these in order to fill out your track. So hi-hats are definitely a big one. But when it comes to cymbals, I'm not going to stop there. I also have a little ride and crash loop, where we have a ride hitting every beat, and then we have a crash hitting where the snare usually hits. Now that crash part is not always necessary. It's not always necessary to layer your snares with crashes, but it's something that I think works very well in a dubstep setting. It sort of adds a little more tail to the snare, and it makes it sound just nice and airy and filled out. And now already we're really starting to sound much more like a proper dubstep drop and not just a loop with drums on it. Even though in reality this is just a loop with drums on it. But the next thing that I'm going to add here is something else on the offbeat, and this is something that is very commonly used, tons of different styles of music, which is chants. Now this chant just sounds like this. It's a really short chant that I made sure that I boosted the high end a lot. I added a little bit of bit crushing to this chant, and it's a very high end chant. And it's going to layer on the offbeat. That high end is going to kind of mix with the hi-hat. I sort of did that on purpose. Normally it would sound a little better than this. This is a vocal from the Ultimate Vocal Shots from Ghosthack. But I'm just going to use this on the offbeat. And again, just things hitting on the offbeat like that really make it bounce a little better, and it's not just a super stagnant kick, snare, kick, kick, snare. There's like some actual bounce to it. So that's definitely very useful. Chants are very common, and they're very common for a reason. They work really well. The next thing I have for this would be crowd noise. Now this is just some crowd noise that I got off YouTube, and there's some sidechain to it. It's very low volume. You can see it's just real small. Let me boost it up here just so you guys can see. Or so you can hear a little bit. It's just a stadium crowd noise is what's going on right there, and that's all it is. Just cheering in the background, you know, because you're like playing it live or something like that, and there's a crowd and they're going, yeah, you're awesome, you know. That's the idea. So stadium crowd noise. Unfortunately, Ghosthack doesn't have any, but you can just find them on YouTube, and that works really well for filling out kind of background ambience. If you're wearing headphones, you'll probably hear the biggest difference. A lot of this stuff is very subtle. It's important that, you know, when you're doing this, when you're adding in these layers, you're taking subtleties into account, because you can't just throw the subtleties off to the side and only throw in the stuff that you notice right away. All these layers and things are things that you will notice when they get taken away, right? When you're just listening to the track, you're not thinking about crowd noise in the background. You're just hearing just background stuff going on. It's only when it's gone that you actually hear a difference. But now we're going to get in a bit of a different kind of layer, which I'm sure you guys are pretty familiar with, and that is layering an ARP. This is the particular ARP that I've made for this little drop, and it's just an F minor chord with an extra octave on top here. And I made this in Serum. It's just a saw wave, square wave with some volume automation, a little bit of low pass filtering. I also layered in a triangle. You can use whatever ARP you like here, but I added a little bit of downsampling, some delay, reverb. I EQ'd the low end out, stuff like that. It's a pretty basic ARP if you think about it, but the only purpose of this ARP is just to be going in the background, just to add some tonality. And another tool that I like to use to do exactly the same thing is actually strings. I add this in a lot of my tracks. We have a high string, just a high ringing string. And then we have offbeat chords. Hitting with, there's like a viola up here doing this high strings. These are just strings that I got from Flex. You can download the Essential Strings package free if you have FL Studio, because Flex comes with FL Studio. And then I have some staccato cellos for these offbeat strings. So that's hitting in the offbeat. There's a really high note playing the entire time. And whether you play that high note with a string instrument or some kind of synth or something like that, I recommend just putting in a very quiet, just silent in the background high note, because it really kind of opens up the track and it makes it sound like it adds that high frequency content layer. It's very useful. So this is starting to sound much, much better than it was before, but there's still a couple more things I want to add. And the first thing would be a crash cymbal. This is a Ghosthack cymbal here from the Platinum Producer Bundle. And it's just a normal crash cymbal. It's not a super high frequency crash cymbal. It's kind of a mid-range crash cymbal. And I recommend these when you're starting off your drops. There's just that energy that is added to the first hit is just so much higher with that crash cymbal. It's a very important part of this layering process, is adding like crash cymbals like that. And I'm sure that's something that you probably add to your own track, because that's a very, very common thing to use. Next up is something that is not necessary, but I really like to use it, even if it's just a little bit in the background. It's nice. And that is a brass stab. This particular brass stab was taken from Hybrid Trap Essentials, available on the Ghosthack website, and I just pitched it into place, and this is just going to layer in the background. And it just solidifies the root key note of the track as soon as the drop starts. It just fills out that low end. It makes it sound really rich just right at the beginning. I'm a big fan of adding brass stabs, even if it's just quiet in the background. Maybe you don't want it super up front. Maybe you don't want to hear it as much as you hear it in this track. Just a little bit in the back, man. It works out really well. Now, if you've seen me do my live streams on the Ghosthack page, we live stream every weekend. You've probably seen me use this sample from FL Studio, which is Sound Effects Cymbal Noisy. You can just find it in the stock FL Studio samples. And I love layering this. Just turn it down nice and low. You see it's not very high. Turn it down nice and low. It's just a really nice sizzly white noise splash layer. And then I kind of cut it up and added this little bit to it. I just like trimmed it up. I just trimmed it to right there. And added a little bit right in the middle as well. But this will just add some slight, super high frequency white noise. Again, it's just very background layers. It's hard to hear, but it's really good to have that high frequency sizzle on top. And I achieved that with this little sound effect right here. And lastly, the last kind of tip that I would go over is really just to listen to the elements that you have, especially like with basses here, if you're making dubstep. And think, what in these sounds needs filling out? And in my opinion, these sounds are pretty good. They're very good. They're very full. These sounds are very full. But this sound right here, it's very tight. It sounds very good in my opinion, but it's not super filled out. It kind of goes down. There's a lot of empty space here. And what I want to do because of this is I want to add a layer specifically to this sound. And all I did is I usually just find some kind of Foley or just, weird percussive sound to go in places like this, or just some sort of ambience. In this situation, I settled upon this sample that I recorded of, I believe this was me closing my door. And I just chopped up a little short piece of it. And then I went here, I added some stereo delay so it's nice and wide. I kind of trimmed it up. And layering this just in the background, every time that the bass hits, it does wonders, honestly. Especially when I have the stereo delay added. It's nice and big and thick and rich, and it sounds a lot better, like you can hear without it. And then with it. If you're wearing headphones, you should definitely be able to hear that. There's stuff going on the sides, and it's much richer, and it will blend in with the rest of the track better. It especially works really well in this high part. I'm a big fan of that. So layering your sounds that need filling out with other layers. Usually I like using Foley layers. You can use other synth layers if you want. I've done that a lot, kind of layering your basses together, doing stuff like that. Make sure that the layers are mixed properly, like take out the sub frequencies from these kind of sounds and stuff like that. That's kind of important as well. Make sure it's mixed, that it's not just thrown on top and it sounds all muddy, but listen to your sounds and figure out what needs filling out and layer that. So now to recap, this is what we started out with. And this is what we ended with. So there we go. That is how I go about filling out my tracks. And I usually do these kind of techniques when I'm doing dubstep or really any other kind of track. I do this when I'm doing drum and bass, when I'm doing house music, when I'm doing anything that isn't super minimal and super tight and super small. If I want it to be big and heavy and rich and thick, I utilize at least a few of these techniques because they're very versatile. It's a very good kind of list of techniques to go through when you're listening to your track and think, what else do I need to add to really make it pop and to make it big and to make it more energetic. So if you like this video or you found it helpful, be sure to hit the like button below. You can also subscribe for more music production tutorials. And like I said, we do live streams on weekends where I'm constantly making music and I'm constantly going over other things. It's very interactive. It's a lot of fun. So we really appreciate the support. Also, if you have other things that you do in your tracks in order to fill it out and to make it more thick and rich and all the things that I've been talking about in this tutorial, let us know in the comments below. We'd really like to hear. It'd be very interesting for us to look at, and also be very interesting for other producers to look at too. We all have an opportunity to learn here. So once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Happy producing.